Hey, before we get to today's great episode, wanted to let you know of a new exciting thing going on for the Lounge. For the first time since we started this podcast, the Lounge has entered into a partnership with a company that is aligned in how we think. Completely stop gambling. So Betttr is giving away 200 free subscriptions for life to the first 200 users from this podcast. Download Betttr, find the link in the show notes, or searching Betttr in your app store. So it's Bettr, Bettr, quit gambling. Search for that on the App Store or click into the link in the podcast show notes. So I'll see you on Betttr. And now to today's episode. Welcome into the Gambling Recovery Lounge. My name is Eric, and I'm a compulsive gambler in recovery. Date of my last bet, June 15th of 2021. Welcome into the Lounge. This is experience number 22, and it's good to be back. It has been a couple of months since we've been away. It's been a really busy fall and now holiday season. And this is sort of the year-end episode of the Lounge. And when it airs for all of you hearing it now, it will probably be the early part of January. But I'm really excited to do this year-end and holiday episode. Experience number 22, and my great friend, brother in recovery, Markus, is with us from Santa Monica, California here. So I'm going to bring Markus in. How you doing, Markus?
Hey Eric, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
For sure. All right. So like we start with every guest, we're going to first ask Markus to talk about the song that he's chosen for his recovery and relatability and a little bit about why that is. So take it away, Markus.
Absolutely. My name is Markus R. and I'm a compulsive gambler, and it's been 620 days since my last bet. So my recovery song, I really don't listen to lyrics often with songs, but I had listened to a song that was recently out about less than a year ago by Morgan Wallen called What I Want. And the reason I picked this song was one, it was very catchy and I had been listening to it over and over and over again. But when I actually listened to the lyrics after listening to this song for quite a while, it really reminded me of my own personal gambling journey. And the first couple lines are, "You don't want this heart, it's already broke. Everything she touches goes up in smoke." And the whole point of the song is really that Morgan Wallen, the singer, is wanting this. He knows all the bad ramifications of this girl that he's chasing, but it's still what he wants. And it was very just emblematic of my gambling addiction and how in my addiction, I knew gambling was so bad for me and it would lead me to destruction in so many ways, but it was what I wanted. And I wanted to choose it over and over and over again. And I knew what I was getting myself into amid all these warning signals. So that song really reminds me now when I listen to it of, giving up that control and not choosing what I want and giving it up to my higher power. So, yep, it's a catchy song and it really reminds me of the path that I just never want to go down again.
Awesome. I don't know if I've heard it, but I often don't realize that I've heard songs until I actually hear them. So that's
Yep.
Morgan Wallen, What I Want. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to definitely check it out. And I encourage everyone out there listening to do the same. So thank you for sharing that, Markus. So, all right. So let's get into it all. We'll start so you can introduce yourself sort of to the audience a little bit about sort of your background, childhood, kind of the
Yep.
family dynamics and your origins. And then we'll lead into kind of where gambling starts to appear in your life.
So I grew up as the middle child between two sisters, one older, Rachel, and one younger, Sophia. And growing up, I loved to play sports, be outdoors, enjoy kind of like the Southern California sun. Grew really fond of baseball, loved watching sports with my dad. He came from Baltimore, Maryland, so he was a huge Orioles fan and Ravens fan. And growing up with the Chargers and loving really every second of those journeys. But I would say that now that I can reflect on my past, being the middle child, I definitely was kind of a jokester. And, I love to make other people laugh anytime there were conflicts or problems. at home with my family or arguments, I would always try to kind of make light of the situation or smooth over the situation and try and make everybody happy through my own humor and really people please others so that I could kind of deflect any kind of situation that was going on where, there were arguments and try and diffuse those situations. So, yeah, I grew up in a really happy family. I had a great childhood. No one in my family gambled. I was really introduced into gambling for the first time at a casino. Once I turned 18, it was definitely just a thing to do in high school was to drive out and play casino games. So primarily blackjack, started off with would bring like a $20 bill to the casino. We even went with my dad and my friends' dads, like when we all turned 18, just as, a fun event and a thing to do. And yeah, just did, small hands, $5 here, $5 there, and was definitely, just a good time and thought nothing of it. Was just like, cool, that's just something to do on a Friday night. You bring 20 bucks, just like you would bring 20 bucks to go to the movies. So that was really my first kind of foray into gambling.
Let me ask
Yes.
you, before that, though, as you're talking about your growing up and the sports bonding between you and your dad specifically. So you said there
Mhm.
was no gambling in the family, but was there even, which I think is really common, like fantasy sports, things like that, that people get involved in, even if it may not be, even not in some cases for money specifically or small amounts of money? Did that ever even come up in the dialogue as you and your dad were so bonded over sports that fantasy leagues were going on for either of you, or did that just not come up and it was just really about the love of the game?
No, I'm glad you asked that because I actually got involved in fantasy sports in seventh grade, and it was a big thing. We played with a couple of my teachers, fantasy basketball with like our PE teacher, fantasy baseball with our history teacher. So yeah, very early on, I was very involved in fantasy leagues, and I just loved, watching players' stats, drafting players, researching. So I was hugely involved in that. I mean, just over summers. I would spend hours on Gmail chat with my friends and just, proposing trades and watching games and checking box scores and things like that. So huge influence from very, very early on.
Teachers, I don't even think I don't know that I've heard anybody say that. So, but there was no money being exchanged
Yeah,
in those leagues with teachers.
yeah, no money being
Oh,
exchanged with
phew.
teachers,
Okay, that's
but
good.
maybe, like, hey, if you won, you would get like a free homework assignment that you wouldn't have to do or something like that.
There's a little bit of gambling in that, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So pretty normalized childhood growing up, family unit pretty stable, parental unit pretty stable. So no other family addictions of any kind that were, pervasive around you at all.
So my mom, she was born in Sweden. So she was a smoker. And her whole family were smokers. Her sister, my aunt, she still is. But my mom did quit smoking when she had my oldest sister, Rachel. So whether or not that's addiction is uncertain for sure, but she was able to stop. But yeah, pretty much other than that, no addictions. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so you started to go into the beginning of your gambling. So what starts to happen from there in terms of more gambling and the friendships and things like that?
Yes, for the first couple of times, it's just like fun and games with our dads. But myself and a couple other guys who were on our baseball team, we would go more frequently on Friday nights, or once we went actually like during lunchtime my senior year, just kind of like for the thrill of it. And we would lose every time with just 20 bucks and be pretty upset about it. But I remember once we went at lunch with my baseball team and we came back and we were late for practice and I had lied to my coach about where I had been. The two other guys I was with lied as well. One of my teammates was a troublemaker, and the coach kind of called him out on his BS that he was with a specific teacher at lunch preparing for a test and asked the teacher, and the teacher found out he was lying and he got cut from the team. And I kind of thought nothing of it. I was like, dang, thank goodness I'm okay. So I would say early on, it went from something that was pretty harmless to maybe something that was a little bit more, right? I didn't really understand that, hey, maybe this is something that's going to lead to a full-blown addiction in the coming years. But I would say that's kind of like the first moment where things started to go awry with gambling, really early on. And that had probably been about 10 trips to that casino when that unfolded. So, yeah, I think the craving and the urge to go back was certainly there.
Sports betting had not yet entered your life, though, even though that was like your whole sort of existence and your love of life and
Yep.
bonding was sports, but not yet.
Sports betting had not entered into the fold.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So then what happens after that?
Yeah, so then I go off to college. I gamble in college, really only when I go to Las Vegas, just playing casino games. It certainly had been glorified in college just by other people bragging in my fraternity about, hey, I went to Vegas and I was able to count cards at the blackjack table and paid for my whole trip. Whether or not they actually did count cards and were kind of, tooting their own horn, we don't know. But I try to do that as well and bought a couple different books to practice counting cards and watched the movie 21 and really got in kind of the thrill of it. But of course, that all went out the window the moment I had a drink and sat down at a poker table in Vegas. So I wouldn't say that my gambling accelerated at all in college, other than just kind of revisiting casino games and tables in college.
All right. And still at this point, it hadn't come into your household or other people that were super close to you in your life.
No, did not.
All right. Let's keep it going. So,
And
what continues to happen?
yeah, and so after that, I graduated college, and mind you, I had just looked back on my Facebook just to kind of revisit old memories, and I had a bunch of people posting on my page back in college calling me like the sports almanac. And so you understanding sports and researching sports and knowing everything there is about sports, that's what I was. And I remember we'd play fantasy leagues in college. We would do March Madness brackets. I would always win March Madness brackets for money and fantasy leagues for money as well. And so after I graduated college, that's when I was introduced to Bovada, and a couple older friends I knew had begun sports betting. And for me, it seemed like the perfect way for me to leverage my quote unquote knowledge of sports to maybe make some money gambling.
Got it.
Um,
And for the audience who doesn't know, one of the major platforms where you can, we'll say, not completely on the up and up within the United States, be wagering legally. That's one of the many overseas accounts. There's thousands of them probably at this point. So that was your first entry, is one of these websites. That was certainly one of my first entry, and many others like us. So I just wanted to make sure people understood what that terminology was.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was really my entrance into sports betting is with an offshore sports book. Yeah, you use a credit card to try and deposit money or a debit card to try and deposit money. And I don't exactly remember whether or not I had won or lost early on, but I do remember that it was definitely fun and I definitely liked it a lot. And I really found just more enjoyment out of watching sports games all the time, which I did anyway, and then had a little bit of money on it.
So before you made the first deposit, because I think about this for my own life, and when I've made that first deposit into an offshore account, and I still remember the day I did it, I deposited $100. But I remember thinking to myself, this is probably not a good idea, but of course did it anyway. Do you remember vividly at the time, like, what am I about to do here? Is this legit? Should I be doing this? Or, you know what? I'm young, it's fun. I think everybody else is doing it, so what the fuck?
The latter, yeah, definitely.
Mm,
I'm young, it's fun. What the fuck? Maybe this is a way I can, make some money or have more fun. Or because it was illegal, a way to kind of give me more of a thrill or
mm.
maybe be a little bit more edgy and add to my personality and maybe be, a little bit more of a bad kid or a bad young adult. And maybe people would resonate with me or be attracted to me because I had or was doing illegal activities.
Now, do you say that, which is a really good point? I think what we always find out when we get onto this side of the fence in recovery and we start to dig into ourselves, our past, our history, what kind of trauma we went through. Do you feel like you might have had that desire to do something a little on edge because growing up to that point, your experience in life, you were always too straight laced, you were the good kid, you were the reliable kid. Everybody expected Marcus to be the straight A student and never get in trouble. Like, do you feel like there was that pressure for you? And it was like, here's a release finally in my life.
Yeah, I think there was some bit of individuation and me wanting to be someone new and or someone else and kind of breaking away from the idea that I am, just really straight edged and maybe there's nothing more to me and, maybe I'm a boring person and this could kind of
Mm.
add to my personality and persona and I would become, more attractive. And yeah, that's absolutely how I was, in my childhood. I got good grades, behaved in school, really studied hard, tried to stay away from, social activities or, things like drinking or going out and things like that. So definitely.
Interesting. All right, so now you're in the
Yep.
world of sports gambling. So what starts to happen?
Yeah, so what starts to happen? I definitely start gambling more, get involved with some older friends that I had for my fraternity who wanted me to place bets for them. I got a lot of enjoyment out of that. Older guys hitting me up and saying, "Hey, can you place a bet for this or that?" And I was like, cool, I'm getting all this attention. Maybe this is really something that I want to go forward with. So, then I really started to house people's bets as well because I would take their bets and I would see, hey, this person's lost a lot every time I put it in. Why don't I just house it? So I was doing that for a little bit of time as well and becoming a bookie to a certain extent for sure. And I remember I was housing one of my friend's bets during the Women's World Cup, and he kept betting on the US women to win. And they won the whole tournament. And so I lost a ton of money. And that was really the end of me, quote unquote, housing people's bets or becoming a bookie. But I still wanted to make bets myself. So I would either tell people, hey, I'm not like gonna place your bets anymore, or I would just do it on my own.
So
But
in
yeah.
that example, with that person winning with the Women's World Cup, did you actually have the money to pay them? Or this is where you started to do some other shit?
Yeah, I definitely still had the money to pay them. This was really just early on in my addiction and my gambling. And so, things really hadn't deteriorated just yet. Money was going up and down. I remember I had a big win. I was able to do like a free deposit using some crypto, and you have to roll it over a certain amount of times for it to be unlocked. And so I remember playing blackjack and for whatever reason, I couldn't lose. And so I made like this large five-figure sum of money where I like won just because I had to roll over the deposit bonus and made this money from it. So yeah, certainly I was really excited from that. And I remember cashing out that money and having it, but we'll see what happens after, I cash out that money.
All right. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, so from there, I was, placing bets or becoming a bookie. And one of my friends, he was like, "Hey, I know someone who can give you a credit line and you can place as many bets as you want to." And he's like, "I can give you like a referral fee if you refer anybody else in." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is great. Like, this sounds awesome." So that's how I got signed up with a bookie. And this was probably around 4 or 5 years after I had graduated college. So I had been, really kind of slowly sports betting throughout this time, just using offshore books. And then when I got this bookie, I referred a bunch of friends, and I remember really just like I couldn't get my hands off of my phone. I just couldn't stop making bets. I didn't have to deposit money that I didn't have, and I could make really as many bets as I wanted to. So this is really where things started to spiral out of control.
And you're at this point, you're how old?
At this point, I am probably 28 years old.
Okay. And this was after you graduated, so had you moved back home to San Diego and you were living with your family, or you were still you were on your own somewhere?
Not yet, yeah. So still on my own, living in Manhattan Beach at the time.
Got it. Okay. So you're isolated.
Yep.
Nobody knows what's going on. You're lying, or you're not even having to lie. You're just not talking about what you're doing, and people are
Yeah.
probably not asking you, like your friends and family, because like you wouldn't just ask if you're doing some crazy shit unless you were starting to exhibit behaviors that were suspicious to people. But doesn't sound like that was really going on.
Yeah, so no one knew that I was really starting to become a compulsive gambler and that I had my own bookie with, a huge credit limit and I have my own book. No one can see my P&L. I'm making these bets all the time, 24/7. And, this really spans the course of 2 years when I was living in Manhattan Beach. So transitioning from, a book to then a bookie to betting over the course of 2 years, I ended up draining pretty much all the money I had. I lost everything that I had in my savings account. I had liquidated my 401k that I had worked for 4 years at my prior employer. I had taken out loans, personal loans. I had maxed out my credit cards and, things really, really deteriorated. And I had even come up with a payment plan for the bookie that I owed where I would pay him, $1,000 a month over the course of X amount of months to continue gambling. So that's where things went completely downhill. And I remember I had a lot of money on the NFC Championship game. It was the Packers and the 49ers. And I bet really heavily on the Packers, thinking that they would cover with a teaser bet and they didn't cover. They got blown out, and I lost all the money I had. I wasn't able to afford paying it back. And I remember walking down to the beach Sunday night and just praying to God and asking God, please let this be my last bet. And I had texted some friends my bet slips, and they had seen that I had lost, and they were like, dude, you got to stop. Like, don't bet anymore. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I'm gambling on the Super Bowl. And so not having any money at all, being completely in debt, basically taking every single paycheck I would get from work and paying the bookie for tons of money that I still owed, wasn't enough to get me to stop gambling. I still had to bet on the Super Bowl because it was the Super Bowl. It was big. And I had to kind of show face, and everybody knew that I gambled on sports. And I couldn't be the guy that was at the Super Bowl and not gambling on sports. So a lot of that was ego and pride too,
Mm.
but I still wanted to gamble.
So at this point, you and your dad, as far as that relationship being so tied to sports, these things just still never came up in conversation as much as you guys were doing the sport thing together. Although I guess maybe since you were living apart, I guess you were able to kind of separate the two things.
So I would occasionally bring up sports betting with him and I would brag about it. I'd be like, hey, I bet on this team to win, bet on the Spurs to beat the Warriors in game 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I made $100 on it. And yeah, I would gloat and I would tell him, but I would only tell him about my wins. I would never tell him about my losses. And I would tell him a fraction of the amount I was gambling. And yeah, we definitely kept in touch a lot. We talked about sports all the time. But the amount, how much I was losing, that never came up. Why would I tell him that? I was
Right.
definitely keeping it all a secret.
And so it would have never occurred to him to even like question this as a problem because you're only talking about it when you won, and B, like it was just sort of this casual occasional,
It would have been
which,
impossible for him to know.
right, 6 years ago or whatever, that about 6 years ago when that
Hmm.
was or so, gambling certainly wasn't what it is today. It wasn't as prevalent. It wasn't as, certainly not hyped and legal. So very much downplayed in society. Nobody would really think any differently. So it makes total sense why that wouldn't have come up. And so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because I asked that because I think a lot of parents go through this, like when they ultimately find out about their kids and that this thing has happened to them, there's that natural, I think, parental instinct to say, where did I go wrong? How could I not have seen it. But I think your story is like the typical tale of, I mean, we all become professional liars as compulsive gamblers, but in particular to the people that are closest to us and love us the most, and that we're even so closely bonded to, it's just not something that's going to appear to other people unless they've had experience with others that have gone through it or they've gone through it themselves. So, I mean, to me, it's important to bring that up because there's other parents out there, just like your dad, who this may have been going on literally right in front of them or a little bit geographically separated, but you would never know. You would just never know. And gambling never shows up externally like substance abuse might if somebody's drugging and drinking and things like that. So I think it's important to bring those scenarios up. Okay, so now you bet on that Super Bowl, you're heavily in debt, personal loans, etc. So what's next?
So COVID hits next, and I continue to gamble. And I'm living at home with two other roommates in Manhattan Beach. And I realized that with all the debt that I have, I needed to find a way out. So I remember seeing and Googling for ways to figure out debt. And I remember seeing on TV, how do I get out of this debt? And so, yeah, I signed up for a debt consolidation firm. They tell me, hey, basically, you're just going to not pay any of the loans that you have and you're going to default on these loans. And to me at the time, I'm like, oh, that sounds great. They're just going to negotiate it for me. Sounds good. And I think every step of the way, things kind of get progressively worse. And I find out more and more about what's actually going to happen and that my credit score is going to tank. And I think once I go halfway down this route, I realize there's a point of no return. But I'm able to, settle on the debt for not pennies on the dollar, but a certain percentage on the dollar. So that's what happens next. And then I realized that I have to kind of save up money and come up with a payment plan to help pay off this debt that I have. And so it's COVID, everyone's working at home or remotely. And I decided to move down to San Diego back home. And my parents were obviously thrilled because, here's their son who went off to college and, we miss him. And he's living up in LA and, now he can spend some time at home. And so, I think it was really just like the perfect storm for everybody because they had no idea, was on a payment plan and really needed to be home so I didn't have to pay rent and could be, living with them and saving money that way.
And at this point, still, not only not your parents, not your sisters, nobody in your life knows the extent of what's happening to Markus at this point.
Friends knew that I had lost money, but they didn't know how much money I lost because I would lie about it and I would keep it a secret. And by no means did I say that I had moved home because I was in so much debt and I had lost all my money and drained all of my accounts because of gambling. They really thought it was because of the genuine reasons I tried and lied about for moving home.
All right, so now you're home
Yep.
and it's
Yeah, so
COVID. So what's going to
yep.
happen next?
Yeah, so now I'm home, it's COVID, and I am not gambling for probably about 6 months, just trying to save up money. And I have another event where I owe two of my friends a lot of money because the year before I had lied to them about placing a bet on the Lakers to win the NBA title. And I said, hey, I found these great odds. If you guys Venmo me money, then I'll place the bet for you. And
Mm.
of course, the way it turns out and the way my higher power had it scripted for me, the Lakers won the NBA title. They had Venmoed me this money early. I had been laughing to my other friends how I just got all this free money ahead of time. The NBA finals happen. I lose again all of this money, and it's still not enough for me to, learn my lesson. And it wasn't more than a couple months after that that I was back and I was gambling again. I was able to pay off the bookie slowly, and I had good payment plans set up, and I had some extra discretionary income. And instead of paying off all my debt or stopping gambling, I got back into it and I started gambling again. And now we're going into 2021, 2022, 2023, and things just get progressively worse and worse. And I am gambling on anything and everything
Mm.
through multiple books, multiple online websites, offshore books, opening up new offshore books as much as I could to get, deposit bonuses, anything I could get my hands on. And things were truly again spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, I'm still paying off, a bookie, I'm paying off these debts that I have, and the pressure again is just mounting on me.
Mm. So do you remember, Marcus, like as that was happening to you, now that you can look back with some clarity, coming up on 2 years soon in recovery, what was actually happening to you as it was happening? Did you understand you were completely out of control and that you had an addiction? Or was it like, I don't really understand what's happening to me, but I just can't stop and I don't know what it's called, but I'm going to just keep going?
I truly believe that I did not really understand what was happening to me, and I felt like there was always light at the end of the tunnel, and that at some point in time, maybe I would stop gambling or I would win enough money to pay off my debts and stop gambling. And so I became completely delusional
Mm,
with my entire life. And I had completely tricked myself into thinking that there was a means to the end and I was going to come out of this alive and things were going to work out as long as I just kept gambling, but maybe gambled smartly or tried a different strategy or only gambled on Saturdays and not Sundays. And so I had lost all concepts of money that I should be saving, paying off debts. I even kept a spreadsheet with all the different debts that I have. And as all gamblers know, the dream world, I would create different scenarios where I would win money and be able to pay off these debts. But I was literally just typing numbers in a spreadsheet, coming up with
mm,
these fictitious scenarios of paying off this debt or coming out alive. And so it wasn't really a situation where I wanted to seek help. I just thought that the big win was going to be around the corner and that, really like this was a good way for me to actually try and survive the gambling addiction was just getting better and gambling my way out of it.
Did you, at this point, slip into any sort of other emotional, we'll say trauma? Like, did you feel like depression, severe anxiety, antisocial behavior, those kinds of other mental diseases that come into play as all this is going on? And did you start to medicate yourself in different ways? Had drinking come into your life to try to numb what was going on, or anything else like this? Because this is a lot you're talking about that you're going through, and there's, I think, only so much a human being can take.
Yeah, I was living in San Diego by myself. I'd gotten an apartment. Who knows how I got that apartment with such a low credit score, but I do remember I had to pay more for the apartment because my credit score was so low. But yeah, I would frequently get blacked out. I would go and pick up, a 12 pack and maybe it would be a Saturday or a Sunday and I would just watch games and drink that whole 12 pack and gamble. Or I would go to a sports bar and do the same thing. I remember one time I was gambling at a sports bar and I got so drunk because I was just so excited there gambling and drinking so heavily that the next thing I knew, I woke up. This was on like a Monday night, maybe Monday Night Football. I woke up in like the middle of a street and my pants were completely soaked in my own urine and my phone was dead and I had kind of like no idea where I was.
Mm,
And yeah, I was within walking distance of my apartment and I remember kind of like stumbling around and being just really delusional until I kind of found my bearings maybe after 30 minutes and I was completely panicking in my own head like, oh my gosh, I got to go to work tomorrow. It's so drunk still
mm.
and I have no way to find my way home. So, yeah, the more and more I reflect on it, the crazier the stories get that I can remember. But I was resorting to really alcohol to try and numb the pain that I was going through.
All right. So what's next?
Yeah, so what's next is I find a girlfriend. Her name is Liz at the company that I'm working at. She's living in Austin, Texas. And I tell her about, the gambling I do on sports. And I really try and keep it low key. And these are small bets. And, kind of becomes envious of like how I have so many quote unquote friends, right? But maybe these are just gambling friends that I have. And she thinks it's cool that I really like sports because she hadn't dated anybody who had really liked sports in the way that I did. And she's like, man, this guy's so passionate about something. And that something just happens to be sports, but she has no idea how serious my addiction is. So I end up moving to Austin, Texas, and that's where she lives. And I was really excited about it. I remember one, because there are no income taxes in Texas. And I was like, oh, this is great. I have extra money to gamble.
So did you tell
And
her from when you met early on that you did gamble at all on sports, or just that you loved sports so much?
that I love sports so much. And then the gambling kind of came up naturally, just small, just like, oh, sometimes I place money. Well, I told her that I always win and that it was definitely an income stream.
An
So
income
completely
stream. Oh,
lied.
that's a good one.
An income stream.
Love it.
So completely lied about that. And I think early on in relationships, all you can do is really trust somebody. That's all you can do. And, I think she thought of it that way and was like, okay, cool. Marcus really is into sports. He really likes sports. And the lie I was telling to myself, right, which is
Mhm.
I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to make money from it. It was the lie that I told her.
So how long had you been dating when you moved to Austin? And did that happen because did she invite you to move there? Or was it like a collaborative discussion and you were like, maybe I need to get the hell out of California? And was it maybe starting to creep into your mind that all these lies were going to catch up to you if you remain here and maybe you can get a fresh start there and somehow keep this going?
Yeah, it's a good foreshadowing, Eric, of what is about to happen. We had considered or her moving to San Diego and us getting an apartment in San Diego. But then I found the allure of getting a bigger paycheck in Austin. And I figured, hey, actually, it just may be easier to move to Austin, where she already had a place with a lot of space and us not needing to go and apply for an apartment because I knew that I had a bad credit score. So a little bit of
Mm,
it was too just like kind of hiding, right? Hiding in
right.
plain sight and coming up with a little bit of a ruse. But yeah, that was definitely a blessing, I think, because it really kind of put me out there and really grew our relationship together. And had we been in San Diego, I'm not sure how things would have transpired. But was I running from something? Yeah, probably. I was definitely running from Los Angeles in Manhattan Beach for sure. Did not want to go back there because I just had too much trauma that was unrealized. So yeah, maybe it was, a fresh, clean slate, move into a new city,
Mm.
see what happens, and maybe, I'll stop gambling or my fortunes will turn, and I'll finally start winning.
All right. So now you're in Austin. So
Yeah, so
let's
now I'm in Austin and our relationship really starts to blossom. I start to gamble just as much as I was before.
and time
Um,
wise now we're what, 2023?
Yeah, so
20
2023.
Okay.
So same thing happens, all summer I'm really just gambling on baseball. Fall comes around, I'm gambling on college football, I'm gambling on NFL. Then springtime comes around and I'm gambling on March Madness. And so we had been dating for about a year and a half, maybe a year and a half plus, coming up on 2 years.
Mm.
And I decided to propose and was something that we were both really, really excited. I had felt like maybe my gambling was under control. I had saved up some money, but I still carried a ton of debt. And I really hadn't thought about her figuring out anything about me or uncovering any of my finances or anything like that. I had really just lied straight to her face about, my financial situation and
Mm.
felt like maybe I'll just deal with everything later or things aren't as bad as they seem and just lying to myself at that point in time.
Wow. So now you're
Yeah,
gonna you're gonna pop see you're gonna pop the question.
I'm gonna pop the question
How
and
did
this
you
is
afford the engagement ring?
I'm glad you asked. So she actually bought the engagement ring and then I paid her back. So we had picked it out together. And mind you, just quick backstory, we would go on vacations and things like that. And my credit card was always at the max, always at the limit. And so she would book a lot of the trips using her credit card or points or things like that. And then I would pay her back later. And one time or multiple times, she said, hey, like, how come you haven't Venmoed me for this trip? It's been like a month, like
Mm.
we're supposed to split these 50-50. And of course, I was just buying time for myself. And she thought it was weird, but I would eventually pay her. And so, she had no reason to really question anything I had done
So
at
what
that
kind of
point.
lies would you make up when she would ask that question? Like, what's
I
up?
would I would say, oh, I deleted my Venmo account from my phone. Or, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize that you Venmo'd me. Just completely deflecting. And she'd be like, what's going on? Like, come on.
Right, right. She's
So
starting to probably put the pieces together that something's up, right? Like, and knowing Liz now, as I do, she's extremely insightful. And yeah, I would have been interesting to know back then and to witness what was transpiring then. Okay,
yeah.
so all right, keep it going. This is extremely interesting.
Yeah, so now I decided to propose. So this is March of 2024
Hmm.
and first week of March. And so I book a trip to Key Largo and I booked the trip and we go out to Key Largo and it's championship week of college basketball. So everyone's playing in the championship tournaments and I decide to propose on a Saturday, right around sunset. And I remember during the day, I was really just very nervous. And so, what did I do to kind of like ease my nerves? I had a couple beers, we had a couple drinks together. There were college basketball games on. And all of a sudden, I'm placing big bets. And my friends know that I'm about to propose, and they're like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Like, you shouldn't do this. Like, you really, really shouldn't." And I remember texting them extremely adamantly in all caps, "Place this bet for me. Do it. Place it.
Wow.
Just place it." Yeah.
Okay.
And really
Okay.
just forcing them to place these bets for me. And I propose. It's amazing. And I get really drunk, and I continue to bet and then I lose pretty much every bet that I make, and I double down and tell my friends to double down and double up the bet and double up the bet. And I remember going to bed trying to watch the St. Mary's Gonzaga game, and I remember that I was gonna lose, and it was just a huge double down. And I say, whatever, no big deal. And I go to bed and I wake up the next morning to a huge hangover and a text from my friends about how much money I was down and I had lost the amount of money that the engagement ring cost.
Oof.
And it was a devastating blow to me, especially that next morning. I'm supposed to, just be excited. We're driving home. We're going to call people and let them know that we just got engaged. It's a really happy moment. And I had an Apple Watch at the time. And so my text show up on my Apple Watch, and Liz was packing up my Apple Watch that I had left on the bedside table, and it said, Marcus is down X amount of money, and it was a huge sum. And she said, "Whoa, whoa, what is this?" And I just lied to her, and I said, "Oh, I'm not down that much money. I'm down, a quarter of it." But my friend, he doesn't want his wife to know that he's down a lot of money, and I'm just gonna cover for him. It's no big deal. And so she looks at me and it's like, "That's a really crazy story, but I believe you and you better make that money back because that is insane, even the quarter that you had lost." And so I went into complete kind of crisis mode and panic mode at that moment. And that was really the first moment that Liz was like, "There's something up with this guy. Like, this is really, really crazy. Like, I'm not sure what's going on with him. Why did he want to gamble this much when we just got engaged and we had an awesome night and a great dinner and, celebrated? And now he's down all this money."
This is like to me one of these really important points to talk about with where this addiction takes people on the spectrum of emotion, because as you're talking about what's up there on the probably top few things of happiness in your life where you get engaged, your way of celebration was to go obliterate everything with gambling. And when I say that, because it reminds me on another end of the spectrum, and I've shared this story with you and many others about attending my partner's niece's funeral nearly a decade ago. And my reaction to trying to deal with that situation was to excuse myself to go to the bathroom and sit there for a while and gamble, right? And so this is why when we talk about gambling is not related to a financial illness, that it is an emotional illness. And regardless of the mood, as high as the highs can be and as low as the lows can be, we all get to the same place of the action, regardless, when we're in the addiction. And so, on that note, we're going to pause and take a break. And then on the other side, we're going to see where this goes next. And then there's a lot of good stuff to come when we're going to talk about recovery. But we'll continue on this really, really powerful story with Markus. We'll be back in the Gambling Recovery Lounge. All right, welcome back into the Gambling Recovery Lounge. All right, we left off on a really pivotal point in Markus's story. So Markus, pick up here now where everything is now blowing up.
Yep. So everything's blowing up right in my face. I celebrate my engagement by losing so much money, the amount of money that my engagement ring cost. But mostly I just was so in my addiction that I needed to go gamble. I had to, from at that point in time, the most important day and happiest day of my life. So yeah, Liz definitely had a little bit of an inkling, and this was yeah, again, beginning of March, NCAA conference championships game happened, and we had planned to spend the next month in Miami Beach. We had a home swap, so we were there for the month of March, and this is when things continue to accelerate, right? They're starting to spiral because now I'd lost all this money. I had been, betting big, and of course our disease is progressive and we only bet bigger and bigger. And so we get to Miami Beach, the NCAA March Madness is on, and I am betting on every single game, every single day, first half, second half, as many parlays as I can get, and things continue to spiral out of control. I'm creating my own new books online, as many as I can get my hands on. And I am just spiraling deeper and darker and losing even more money and losing all the money that I had saved up while I had been in Austin.
How were you, these new accounts you were funding? How were you, because you had all this debt, you're paying back these creditors on these settlements, you've now
Mhm.
blown all the money from the ring. Like, how were you even funding stuff at this point?
Yeah, so some of it I would just get new credit cards. I had paid off some credit cards and I had opened credit cards while I was in Austin just to get more credit limits. And so in my mind, I was in a pretty good financial situation because I had more credit cards and more credit limit, and I had been paying off the debts that I had. But really, what it did was it just opened it up for me to go even deeper,
Yep,
right?
for
Into an
sure.
even darker place.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so what happens next?
So I lose even more money from gambling during March Madness during this month that we're there. And after that month, I am in so much credit card debt. I only have a couple thousand in my bank account to my name. And we had decided that we wanted to move to Santa Monica after this month of March. So we were then going to spend some time in Santa Monica and just look for apartments. So at this point in time, I was extremely stressed out. I had no idea what I was doing, and I knew that the only way I could kind of get out of this hole was to continue gambling and hopefully win my way out of it. Liz and I were looking at apartments in Santa Monica. She's, extremely happy and excited about going back to LA. So, yeah, it was a really exciting time for us, or supposed to be an exciting time. So, we're just like at a happy hour. This is probably the first week of April. And I'm so stressed out about money and maybe paying for this happy hour. I open up my bank account and there's only a couple $1,000s in there. And I think I'm just having it out like in front of Liz and she sees it. I found out later that she does see it. And that's when her alarm bells really go off because the day before we went on a walk on the beach. And now that we were engaged, she talked about, cool, what's the next step for us getting married? And we have all these questions about where do we want to live? Where do we want to settle down? What does a combined financial situation look like if we were to get married? And
Hmm.
I lie about the money that I supposedly had. I think I came up with a number of maybe how much money I would have if I didn't gamble, but I threw it out there thinking that she might be impressed, and she definitely wasn't. And yeah, I throw out this number, and of course, we're sitting the next day at a happy hour, and she sees something drastically different. So that weekend, we go to our friend's house who has us over, and we're there, we're drinking wine, we're having a great time. In my compulsive state, I get extremely drunk. I probably drink, a bottle and a half of wine, maybe more, and I pass out.
Mm,
And they make a nice little bed. So we're going to sleep there. We're going to stay over. We're going to enjoy the weekend. And when I black out, this is when Liz, because now she's extremely suspicious of me, she goes into my phone and opens up the banking app that I have.
mm,
And she goes in there and she sees that I didn't have that much money. So she's like, "Oh my gosh, like what's up with this?" And she then clicks on a link that shows your credit score within
mm,
the app. And the
mm-hmm.
credit score shows something horrible. And then her alarm bells really, really go
Oh,
off,
wow. Okay.
and you're able to click into the credit score and you're able to see, all the outstanding loans and
Yep.
charge-offs and everything that I had done in the past. So she knew that at this point in time, I was
The jig is up.
the jig is up. It was completely up.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I don't know any of this is going on because I'm completely, tanked and blacked out and asleep. And I remember her rustling me awake and being so furious. I've never seen her this furious before, and pointing to my phone and asking me how much money I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember waking up and kind of being really surprised and no idea kind of what was going on, and immediately just lied and said, "Oh, what? Oh, you're looking at the wrong app. I have all this money in a separate account. It's in like a brokerage account. Like, don't worry about it." And then she
Wow.
goes, "Well, okay, then show me the account." And I go, "Oh, yeah, yeah, don't worry about it. Like, just go back to bed. Like, I'll show it to you." And she says, "No, this is it. This is stopping right now. We're going home right now." And I
Wow.
can tell that she is furious, and I know that my jig is up. And we go to the car and she drives us home. We're driving down Venice Boulevard. We're staying in Santa Monica, and we pull over at the Gelson's on Venice Boulevard,
Mm-hmm.
and she pulls in the parking lot and she says, "Where's all your money? Tell me right now that you've just been lying to me this whole time, or you're staying here and I'm leaving you here." And she
Wow.
opens up the
And
door
this is
and
the
says,
middle of the night.
middle of the night. This is probably 1:30 a.m.
Okay.
And I lie to her and I say it's in a separate account. Like, let me just pull it up. And she says, "All right, pull it up." And I remember pulling it up and there's nothing in the account. And I
What?
look at her
Oh,
and I
man.
admit and I tell her that I'm lying and that
Mm.
it's all a lie.
Wow. Do you remember that exact moment when you were about to finally utter the words, "It's all a lie"? Like that stuff, because this is now the first moment where you're about to
Yeah.
acknowledge it all. Or were
Yep.
you just still so like drunk and out of it that you weren't really conscious of what was happening?
No, no, this moment I remember so vividly. I was so snapped awake. And I
Mm,
remember the feeling of telling her that it was all a lie. And then she quickly asked, "Well, where did it all go?" And then I
mm.
said, "I lost it all gambling. I gambled it all away." And yeah, I still t remember
Were
to
you
this
looking in her
day.
eyes when you said it?
I'm not going to give myself that much credit. I was probably looking sheepishly down or away, or definitely not looking her in the eyes.
Okay.
There's just no way I was doing
I was
that.
just curious what the moment was like. Okay.
And she proceeded to just start crying
Mm,
and really, really weeping. And it hurt her soul and her heart so much. And I remember her saying, I thought our whole relationship was this perfect, happy moment of destiny where we found each other, and everything was going to be perfect. And, you were my Prince Charming. And I have never heard her cry the way that she was crying. She was inconsolable. And, I think it was really at that moment that I had realized that I had hurt someone else so badly and so much more than I could ever have hurt myself, that something really needed to change. And it was really that at that moment in time, I was like, I blew it and I knew I was going to blow it. And, I had just been gambling and this was all going to come out at some point in time. And, this was it. I just never made it through my gambling addiction and I never made enough money gambling for this perfect, woman that I'd fallen in deeply in love with, and she had fallen deeply in love with me to work out. And I truly thought that that was it. And, I had no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I had all these scenarios kind of playing out in my mind so rapidly. And, like, what am I going to tell everybody? What's going to happen? And I was just so depressed. It was easily the most, depressed and lowest point of my life. Because I think it was really hurting her so much and her just talking out loud while she's crying, like, what is she gonna tell everybody? And, she had this perfect life that she had, and, I had tricked her and lied to her and all these things, and we had gotten engaged, and she was so excited and had told her parents and all of her friends and how good of a guy I was and all these things. And, it's like, yeah, I just had wasted 3 years of her life,
Mm,
uprooted her from Austin where she was really happy and, having a great life to just complete devastation.
yeah.
So I had seen both sides of the coin.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that so honestly. And it really takes me back to that. It's really interesting. We have such parallel stories. We've talked about that a lot, but it reminds me of that morning of the last day I made a bet too. And I got busted. In my case, it wasn't the first time Edgardo had known about it, but it was like my jig was up too because all the walls had closed in very differently than had been before, and the lies and more. It was all coming to a halt there. But it's interesting because you talk about the emotion and the crying and disbelief from Liz, and the in Edgardo's case, I just remember the silence and the fear and the disbelief that he was looking at what I always say, I think he was looking at a monster.
Hmm.
And he couldn't believe after all those many years that I had become what I had become. And so I resonate. And it doesn't matter that your story was just a couple years at the time versus my 20 plus years at the time. Like it's that level of pain that we cause the person that we love the most. And I think you and I experienced that emotional low in sort of the exact same way. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so now you drive home from the Gelson's parking lot. She just somehow gets you guys home.
Yeah, so she gets us home. I admit to being a gambling addict in that parking lot to her, and that I'd maybe not a gambling addict, but that I lost my money. And yeah, we get home, and I don't really remember getting home that much. I remember going to bed just thinking, this is it. My life's over. I don't know what's next. And that night, Liz texted my dad and all of my friends. And I actually do remember this. We get home and she's like, I'm telling everybody what is going on with you. And I'm doing it right now. And I was in tons of debt. And so she texted all my friends, like, hey, Marcus is in tons of debt. He has no money in his bank account. I need you all to know this because whatever life and lies he was telling you, it's all coming crashing down right now
Mm,
and you guys need to look out for him. And that's that. And I remember this moment because this actually really, really helped me a lot. Because I don't know if I could have told any of my friends on my own or my dad on my own any of the secrets that I had and how I was a gambling addict. So her doing that really just put it out in the open for me. And, I'm definitely extremely grateful for that. And so we wake up the next morning and, I again think my life's over. And Liz calls a bunch of my friends who I had been in, gambling group chats with. And, she is just completely hysterical as she should be. And, really upset with just everybody about the situation. Calls my dad. I talked to my dad, I talked to my sisters, I talked to my mom, I talked to my friends. And then, Liz and I go through, basically, we do a financial inventory. So we go through all of my credit reports and we list out every single debt that I have. And we uncover more and more. And she asked me, "Hey, is this it? Like, are these all the debts that you have?" And of course, I'm like, "Yeah." And then we find another one, and she's like, "Why are you still lying to me?
Mm,
Like, here's another one." And then we find another one. It's, "Why are you still lying to me? This is like, tell me everything that you have." And I'm just so embarrassed
yeah.
and shameful that I just want it to end. So, yeah, we list out all the debts and we talked to my dad on the phone. And I'm extremely fortunate that he happened to be in Maryland at the time with his cousin who was out there with him. And he told my cousin about it. And my cousin is a psychiatrist. And he said, "Hey, this is a serious, serious addiction. He
Mm,
needs to get into Gamblers Anonymous immediately. He needs to get rid of any access to money he has immediately, and you guys need to take this extremely seriously." And so, yeah, we took that advice. We looked online. This was Saturday morning for the next meeting that I could go to, and it said the next one was Sunday morning on Santa Monica Beach. And I just remember that slowly that day, that maybe I had a chance. This addiction was extremely serious and I don't think I understood the severity of our gambling addictions that we had and how they were really impossible to beat on our own. And
mm.
we weren't able to do so. And I think having that kind of clarity and understanding of how serious this was and that, hey, there could be a path forward if I go to this Gamblers Anonymous meeting, if I, don't have access to money, that maybe something could work for me.
Did you feel any sense of relief when, I mean, I know the pain that you described seeing in Liz's face and the tears and then all the truth is coming. Was there a part of you, Marcus, that was like, thank God I finally got busted? Because I remember in my situation the final and the pain. But I think I also feel like there was a small part of me that was like, thank God this is over. I don't know where it's going, but I know it's over. And I
Mhm.
didn't really know what that was going to mean. But do you kind of remember any of that emotionally?
Yeah, I had that same emotion. I think it was similar to when you're gambling and you are on tilt and you gamble and until all of your money is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, cool, all of my money is gone. Oh, now I can take a breath and now I can relax because there's some finality to it. It was exactly like that, but it was a stronger emotion of relief. And it's like finally the secret that I've been holding and hiding for so long is out there and everyone knows about it. And, I was fortunate that it was met with a lot of grace and a lot of people understanding and wanting to help me. And yeah, I definitely felt that same relief that you did.
Okay, so it's Sunday morning, and this was April 21st of 2024, and the beach meeting is at 8 a.m. So what happens?
So Saturday happens. We go through the inventory, and I remember we're going to go to this beach meeting the next day, and I'm really excited for it. I really want to go. I'm going to tackle this gambling addiction. It's the next morning. It's probably 7:15. I see my phone. Liz is still asleep. She's a pretty heavy sleeper. And I go, "Oh, I don't really want to go to this." And so I just pretend to be asleep for as long as I can. And it's about 8:10 rolls around and she wakes up and she looks at her phone and she goes, "Oh my gosh, we're late for the meeting. We got to go." And I go, "Oh, are you sure we can go to the next one?" And she says, "Nope, we're going."
Mm,
And she says, "It's all right if we're late, we're going." And get out of bed, throw on some clothes, head over there, show up about 20, 25 minutes late. And there's a group of probably only 6 people at the meeting.
mm,
Show up. I'm like, "Hey, I think it's these people over here." And they say, "Hey, what are you here for?" And I'm like, "Is this Gamblers Anonymous?" And they're like, "Yep, I'm glad you showed up because, we were going to end this meeting early."
wow.
Yep.
Wow. I don't think I ever heard that part of the story. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did that feel? So you share there that day about everything? Did you emotionally break down, or like what was that
Oh,
experience like?
completely emotionally broke down. I really had a hard time getting through the whole story. Started crying immediately when I talked about why I was there. Read through the 20 questions, answered yes to probably 18 of the 20 questions. And it was really a spiritual moment for me to know that I had this fellowship there who also had this gambling addiction. And multiple people shared after I shared, and they mentioned how serious this addiction was, how it's an insidious disease, how I need to keep coming back, when the next meeting was, and that I needed to work this program and show up to meetings. And they gave me my welcome keychain and welcome packet. And yeah, we went from there. But that was, yeah, I'll never forget that moment at the beach and even showing up late. I'm sure everybody at the meeting was like, whoa, who's this guy rolling in late, right? What's this about? And, breaking
Hmm.
down, and, it was a miracle for them.
Oh, it's another similarity in our story. I think I've told you, but my first in-person meeting, which was about 3 weeks after I was on Zoom, but I went to Griffith Park, so another outdoor meeting in LA, right? And I too was there with Edgardo,
Hmm.
and it was probably 15 minutes late. Couldn't freaking find the circle, and then it was like, oh, that just the most terrifying experience to go face to face with it. But yeah, also left like people were so kind and giving me hugs, and it was still numbing, but it was like it was a total game changer. Like facing it and hearing other people face to face, that just changed the trajectory for everything.
Yep.
Okay, so that's Sunday. So that's your day one.
Day
So
one.
what's the next couple days like?
So I don't really remember what day two was like. It was really just more of, I guess I went to work on Monday, just remote work that I had, just dealing with all the ramifications and, trying to tie up loose ends with friends and, communicating with family and things like that. And, Liz and I just talking a lot about what had transpired, and remember making it to day two, and through day two, getting a lot of phone numbers from the beach and texting people from the beach. And then the next meeting is Tuesday at Culver City. And so, yeah, I remember showing up to that meeting a little bit late as well. Had a habit of hey, do I really have to go to this meeting? And it's just classic addiction where we know what we should be doing and what's going to be good for us, but still we kind of like want to resist because of all the shame and the guilt that we have. And would I have to tell this story again
Mm,
to all these people, with my fiance there, and her going to
mm.
listen to it again? Who are these people in the rooms and what's going to happen?
I remember the moment because I was there that night, and I don't remember how late it was, but you're definitely late. And where I was sitting, I had a direct eyesight to the door. So you and Liz walk in, and I'm like, okay, I haven't seen them before. I wonder what the you always just wonder, right? You
Yeah.
immediately, anytime there's somebody new, right? We all do it, right? What's this story? Oh, who's this couple? All that stuff. And then it just happened to be you guys were sitting right next to me on the left. I think there was like two open seats right there. And I
Yep.
was like, okay. So then what happens after that?
Yeah, so we have the meeting. I, share about my sports gambling and, why I was there, and my story and my journey. And, after the meeting wraps up, I remember talking to Jeff F in the program and you in the program, and we're in this little circle with Liz, the us four, and we're just really exchanging some war stories. And I remember you talking to me and telling me about your story and how crazy the sports bets that you made were, at 4 a.m. in the morning on these offshore books on whatever sport was available. And I remember thinking, like, no way.
Mm,
This guy was making those same bets that I was too.
mm,
There's actually somebody here who gets me and he gets what I was going through. And it really, really clicked for me then. And I was like, I can't believe this, that there are other people out there who do the same thing that I
mm,
do. And, immediately I just felt at home and that I belonged and that, this is where I need to be. And it was really just a fundamental conversation for me in my recovery. And we exchanged phone numbers. Eric and I exchanged phone numbers from other people in the fellowship. There was so much warmth and there was so much grace with the group. And it felt like I really belonged. And there was an immediate family and a fellowship and brotherhood and sisterhood. And that felt really good
Mm.
to me. And so, left that meeting feeling even better than I had on Sunday, where now I really felt like, hey, there's people out there that get me and I get them. And, maybe if I just keep showing up, things are going to work out.
Did you feel like it was really going to work then? Or was it, okay, some people I can relate. I finally heard somebody's story that I really relate to. I feel better. I feel a little hope. But man, I don't know how to live my life without gambling. Or had it shifted quickly for you?
I think I was still in shock at that point where I was, really just like kind of disgusted with myself and shameful with myself. And so I didn't want anything to do with sports and was like, I don't need to be looking at sports scores or whatever because I know this is just horrible for me and was really focused on saving my relationship with Liz at that point. And so I
Mhm.
was not going to touch anything. And so I don't even know if I had comprehended or processed that this whole thing was to just stop gambling and stop betting on sports. I was just like in shock and trying to do pretty much anything I was told to do at that
Mm.
point in time.
Yeah, I'm just remembering back to my early meetings too. Is like I don't really know if I believe any of this stuff. But all as I know is my whole life is on the line. My relationship is on the line. My financial destruction was absorbent, and like I had lost all version of a sense of self, worthless. So I, yeah, very much relate to that sort of in shock feeling. But like you're almost just like on autopilot at that point. Like I don't know what else to do, and this is what I'm being told to do. So I better fucking stick with this because I don't have a better plan.
Yep.
Right? Something along those lines. Okay. Then you start going to some more meetings, and then I think it was the following week when there was something more substantial for you.
Yeah, so Liz and I, our permanent base or home was still in Austin, and we were looking for apartments in Santa Monica. And it's funny because the irony of the situation is I didn't want to move back to LA because I had remembered all the gambling that I had done back then. But of course, coming back to LA, the truth finally came out again, and my gambling was brought to light. And I was saved because I came back to LA. But about a week after that meeting, I had heard from a friend who was in another program that I needed to get a sponsor and I needed to start working the steps because that's what he had done and that was the key to success in this program. And of course,
Mm.
he's in my ear about this, he's in Liz's ear about this, and he's kind of bragging about how he's finished so many steps so quickly. And of course, now Liz is like, all right, well, you need to be finishing all the steps immediately. What are you doing? Like, get on it. Um, and of course, we know that's not how
Right.
both you and I have gotten great recovery, but we needed to go back to Austin, and we actually made the decision together, which was also just a blessing that we were going to continue to move to Santa Monica. There was definitely some discussion about, hey, we're not going to be able to make this move. We can't afford it. Let's not move to Santa Monica or LA. But the fellowship and the brotherhood and how large program was in LA was just a huge driver of us continuing to make this decision to move out here. So yeah, the next week at the next Tuesday Culver City meeting, I had that little birdie in my ear that, hey, maybe I needed to get a sponsor. And so Eric, you and I had been texting really frequently over the last week about life, about recovery, about gambling, sports betting, everything. And I felt super comfortable with you. And it was a higher power moment at the end of the meeting. I said, hey, Eric, would you want to be my sponsor? And I remember you said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you asked. Let's talk about this a little later. And I was like, dang it, man. I guess he's not going to be my sponsor.
That was so, and I what was I think I was shocked because it was pretty casual. Like it was after the meeting, and you're like, "Hey, so you like you be my sponsor?" Like it was really sort of casual, off the cuff, and just really caught me off guard, and I think that's why I didn't have an immediate response. Like,
Yeah.
oh, let's talk about this, and then, well, okay, I'll tell the next piece of the story. So
Yeah.
it was the next morning, Wednesday, and I knew you were leaving for
Hmm.
Austin, and I thought, huh, I don't know what time he's leaving. I said, let me test him and kind of see how serious he is. So I was like, hey, I don't know if you're already left or you're about to leave or if you have time. I said, but, and where I live in LA, we're only about 15 minutes apart if there's no traffic, which of course is
Yep.
almost never, but okay, let's say 15 to 30 minutes, somewhere in there. And it was early in the morning, and I'm like, so if you have time, I'll meet you for coffee, and we can talk more about this. And I fully expected, like I do pretty much with everybody who's new, to be either ghosted or no response or
Mhm.
an excuse or I'm already gone, which you could have easily made that excuse and wouldn't have surprised me. And the immediate response within seconds was, I'm not leaving until whatever time. So yeah, let's do it. Let's meet. And I was like, wow, that's not what I expected. And that to me was I guess a God shot higher power moment of, okay, he's serious right now.
Hmm.
So let's see where that goes. Right. So
Hmm.
continue from there.
Yeah, it was, a God shot moment for me, and we had a great conversation. Getting a sponsor and getting you was really fundamental to me, sticking with the program during that time, especially, it being my, second week and being so early in recovery and having so few days. I remember every single day back then, early in recovery, as it was going through, and, you sent over some daily Zooms that I could go and I could listen to. And I remember I listened to one of the daily Zooms, and that was just really helpful for me and staying connected. Staying connected was super, super important for me. And yeah, we packed up the car and we drove across the country and yeah, showed up back in Santa Monica in our apartment. And that was really, the start of my journey and my recovery.
Yeah, and here you are over 20 months and 600 days later. And my first question to you, because now it's all recovery talk at this point. So you haven't relapsed once since you came into the program. And I often say, I think from a statistical perspective, though I don't have any complete data around this, but been around long enough to know that, if I think even on the conservative estimate, maybe 10% of people who start in the program make it a year without at least one relapse and many multiples. That was not my story. I've not relapsed in over 4.5 years since I've come in. You're coming up on 2 years, no relapse. What do you think are a couple of the things that have kept you with no relapse and really embraced the program to kind of give you a path of success?
First, I would want to say that you really need to want to stop gambling. And I had tried multiple times to stop gambling on my own. And so by the time I found the Gamblers Anonymous program, I was just quite frankly sick and tired of relapsing on my own. And I was sick and tired of gambling. And I really wanted this because I knew that my life was on the line and my relationship with Liz was on the line. And if I didn't make a change now, I probably would never make a change again in my life because I knew by myself what I had done in the past and that this was not going to change. So first is just willingness. Second is really our acronym HOW, honesty, openness, and willingness is willingness to do anything. I was really at a point of desperation, and I knew that if I listened to those that had time in the program and recovery in the program, maybe this would work. And, anything that someone threw out there recovery related, I was down to do it. I asked you to be my sponsor and you said, "Hey, let's meet up at this Starbucks." And I said, let's do it. And, let's see what happens. And you really have to be willing to do it. And, you can't work the program on your terms and when it's convenient for you. And you have to really be uncomfortable. And, my whole life I was comfortable being comfortable and being secretive and lying about things and not wanting people to know anything about me. And this was the time for me to make that change and for me to be uncomfortable. So for everybody in the program, it really ties back to page 17 and working everything on page 17 that got me to where I am now. And it's, going to meetings early on. Doesn't matter where the meeting is. We know how far we used to drive to go gamble. We know how late we used to stay up in the night to make that next bet. Go to meetings. If there's a meeting that's far away, you got to go and you got to drive and get to that meeting. And then staying connected with you, telephone list. I mean, when I was in my second week, reaching out to you and talking to you and calling you was super important. And then, yeah, like I said, being uncomfortable. Don't test or tempt yourself. Don't associate with acquaintances who gamble. This was really difficult for me when I talked to my friends on day zero on that Saturday when they all knew that I had a gambling addiction and they would still gamble. They told me that they wouldn't gamble anymore. They said, "We're going to stop gambling because of you, and we're going to do this for you." But they still went and they started gambling again. And I
Mm,
had to cut ties with a lot of my close friends that I had, really, really close friends for years and years and years, maybe even a decade, because they wanted to continue to gamble. And unfortunately, that's not for me. And not testing or tempting myself, that is huge for me too. And that was cutting out sports. And as we know, I'm a sports fanatic. I love sports. It was my life.
yeah, that was my next question. And so many of the new people that are coming in now are younger males, and it's sports gambling. So, very much along the lines of both of our stories. And I, like you, also disconnected completely from sports, certainly in my first couple of years. And I still, we talk about this all the time, obviously offline, Marcus, but like I think gambling on sports just completely changed the way I feel about sports in general. And I spend very little, if any, time watching it at all. It's just not that interesting to me, where it was my whole life. And I think you've shared some of the same things. But I think it's very hard for a lot of younger men, particularly who have had their lives surrounded by sports, and they come into the program and they hear these messages. And I think it's why it leads to a lot of relapse. So, what's your, I mean, other than you just telling your truth about what you've done, like, do you have any advice or wisdom of what people can do to really get to that mind frame of like, I gotta just put this aside and focus somewhere else? Just whatever you can share to help the younger demographic, because you just
Yeah.
turned 33, so
Mhm.
very much you're the demographic of a lot of the young guys that are coming in now, and they're even earlier now in their early 20s sometimes, or even teens. So like, what's your messaging for those guys?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. First is maybe something more lighthearted. When it comes to sports, if you really sit down and you watch people who are watching a sports game and you see how intense they are about it, and when a team wins or a team loses, how upset they get and how it can ruin their whole day,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't just laugh it off and say, "Well, I went to UCLA, and so the Bruins always blow it. They're always a bad team." And now I can look back on it and say, whatever, they're
Right.
always going to stink. Who cares? Right? And so being able to kind of make light of the situation and know that some people are so fanatical about it that it ruins their whole day. And is that the person that you want to be? Is that's so consumed by sports that you're going to get that upset and it's going to carry over into the next day?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first thing I would say. And then, secondly, what really helped me early on was just getting other hobbies, really focusing on other hobbies because my hobby was really after work, I'd sit down, I'd turn on a baseball game, use my MLB TV subscription, and watch games.
Mm.
And it can be anything as small as going on a walk, waking up in the morning and going on a walk, reading a book, going to the gym, just something that you can do religiously and repeatedly that will make a huge difference in your life because life is truly beautiful. And, if we just open our eyes and see what's out there with nature and, with what our higher power has given us, like life can be really beautiful. So I would say those really helped me early on.
Okay. Thank you for that. I also want to ask you about your perspective about the steps of recovery. It's a 12-step program. And, I always say to people, because I heard this early on, which is, you can go to meetings, and that's imperative, especially early on. Go to a lot of meetings, but that's going to help you feel better. But if you really want to make changes in your life, work the steps. But you having gone through now some number of steps, not through all of them yet, but about half, like what's your perspective and your messaging around that whole topic?
Working the steps is just as important as going to meetings. And if you really want to get true recovery, work the steps and it'll completely change your life. If you're early on and you haven't even worked step one, it's really not a huge barrier or a bridge to cross. You just need to get a sponsor, or you can work on step one yourself. But it wasn't until I worked the steps and step one specifically, when I started writing my responses to the 20 questions and I started writing out my stories, that my mind opened up and I had a spiritual awakening to how baffling my life was in
Mm,
this addiction because I'm writing about how many times I said I was going to stop gambling, how deep this gambling uh, illness went, and how many times I went right back to gambling, and how quickly my mind was able to trick me to gamble again and again and again. And it wasn't until I worked step one that I was really enlightened and I was like, oh my gosh, my mind and this gambling disease has tricked me so badly for 8 long years that I had no idea what I was doing. It was like the curtain was pulled up. It was a Wizard of Oz moment that there's someone behind there, controlling your whole life and you have no idea. And so I think going to meetings, you'll abstain from gambling, but there's just so much more to life. And that was just step one. And now I'm on step six, and there's just so much of my own personal character that's changed. I've become so much more confident in myself. I have so much less fear in myself. I'm so much more humble. My ego has completely changed. And my life is just transformed. And I'm so excited to work the rest of them, and then do them over again because, yeah, it's truly life changing. And I'm so happy that I had this gambling disease and addiction and I was entered into this program and I've been working the steps because if I never worked the steps, I never would have conquered these traits that I've had, like people pleasing, and my life would never have changed and never have been where it's at today.
yeah, great perspective. Is there like one or two things that recovery has brought to your life that you never, even in the early days of coming into the program and you were feeling better and those things, is there something that's happened over the course of these, 20 plus months where you're like, wow, I never thought I would experience that. I never thought I'd get that out of this program. I just was hoping to stop gambling.
Totally. I would say with friends, with family, and at work, I now have the ability to say no. And I never had the ability to say no, and I never had the ability to disagree with people, and I never had the ability to give my honest opinion on topics and subjects. And that is something that I never thought I would have. I thought I would always be, the guy who agreed to things and was the yes man. And yeah, it's crazy. Stopping gambling, I never would have thought that I would ever have that character trait that I do now. And it's so empowering for me as I live my life.
What about Marcus higher power? Like that's another thing I think we often hear from people that they struggle with coming in and hearing the some of the overtones about higher power and God, and people especially who are not religious at all struggle with how to figure that out. And like what's your opinion about all of that, and what maybe some advice that you might have for people who struggle with that, especially early?
Yeah, so I grew up going to Catholic church and like we mentioned earlier, was really kind of on the straight and narrow. And I really lost my sense of my higher power and of God and of religion just through my gambling. I really threw that away and never actually went to church, never actually practiced my faith at all. And coming back into the program, I've really recaptured my belief in a higher power and that my higher power ultimately has, control of my destiny and everything happens for a reason. And that has immensely recaptured my life. And I think for people who are struggling with a higher power, I've seen so many people in the program and fellows in the program whose higher power could be something like nature, right? Your higher
Mhm.
power can literally be anything, just something that you believe in that will help you and guide you along your life. So if you are struggling or, if you are secular and don't believe in religion or in faith, just know that your higher power doesn't have to be quote unquote God. It can really be anything that you believe in. It can even be the fellowship of the program. It can be others in the program and that unity as well.
Love it. So I think people are probably wondering, so what the hell happened with this wedding? Did the wedding happen? We had the cliffhanger of the engagement. So what's happening with Liz and life?
Yeah, so we got engaged. A month later, I was, in the program, and we decided to get married the following April. So it was 3 days before my 1 year mark on April 18th, and we got married amongst family and friends, and it was a beautiful wedding. And to reflect back on where I was when I had gotten engaged and all the secrets I was holding and then those coming out, I am completely in shock that, I was there and that we had a beautiful wedding and things are going so smoothly with Liz and, our life together is amazing. And that doesn't mean there weren't bumps and bruises along the way. There were
Mm-hmm.
a numerous amount of bumps and bruises, and our relationship definitely teetered on the point of, hey, do we even get married? Is this even something we want to do? And we had a ton of frank conversations about that. But yeah, we had a beautiful wedding in Arizona, and I am just so grateful and fortunate for that.
And thank you again for having Edgardo and I there. There's so many amazing things about this program, and way up on the list is when you watch people's lives go from the pit of hell and misery with the amount of damage that we go through coming in and the people that we hurt along the way, the people we love the most, and to see that transformation happen and being there to witness the love and happiness between you and Liz and your loved ones. There's just nothing better that I have found in my over 4 years, and being able to be a sponsor and a friend and be part of those life experiences. And that goes with the bads too. I think that's what's great about what we do in the fellowship is you're with each other for the big highs, the big lows, and everywhere in between. And so it's just been amazing to watch that transformation happen. Yeah, I mean, Liz and her participation from obviously from day one and getting involved and being with you at the meetings and really holding you accountable. And I still remember one of the best things that happened. I think it was around 90 days or something, and you had got caught in a lie about
Mhm.
something,
Mhm.
and I remember getting a text from her the next day, like, I need to talk to you. Like, I caught Markus in another lie. He will not stop lying. And I think it was that kind of moment for her of like, when does this ever end? Is there an end to this? And we had a wonderful, like, hour-long conversation. And, I think it hopefully helped her to really realize that this is a really long journey. And, as addicts, we didn't wake up one day and desire to be a gambling addict, and unfortunately, with the addiction and all the financial damage goes a lot of other problems that we create for ourselves, not intentionally, but it's just what happens in addiction. And a big part of that is we get all these terrible character defects, and lying is like the universal one for all of us, that
Mhm.
because you have to, in order to hide your addiction, you have to become a great liar. And
Mhm.
it's really it's like a total rewiring of the brain to, even when you're in recovery, to stop those behaviors. And so I just love that she was willing to have that level of conversation, because there's a lot of people out there in relationships where the partner of the gambler, they may stick around in the relationship, but they don't necessarily get involved in the recovery of the gambler. And so I think it makes it a lot harder because they're not, I think, on the inside scoop, if you will, on what's really happening. And that's why programs like Gam-Anon are so amazing. And just the person being really integrated with what's happening and wanting to be involved even with the tough stuff and not take the approach of, well, that's your problem. So you go deal with your problem. And when you're done, I'm over here and we'll do whatever we got to do over here. So I have a tremendous amount of love and admiration because she's been with you from the beginning and doing all that tough work. And then also, if you could maybe spend a minute, because I know the financial piece of your relationship and how you guys have dealt with that is
Mhm.
another kind of part of the story. So if you can talk a little bit about that, because I think it's also another thing that the gambler sometimes struggles with about how to deal with finances as well as the partner.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that about Liz, Eric, because Liz has been so instrumental and paramount in my recovery, and her active participation in my recovery has been a huge reason why I do have my abstinence. And, I really am eternally grateful for that. And, she would go to every single meeting with me for, I would say, about the first 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
And she's always interested in what I have to share, and we always talk about that after my meetings and things like that. And she always wants to be an active participant. And then on the financial side, because we got the advice from my dad's cousin to for me to give up control of my money, I was also just fortunate to basically get this hard and steadfast rule immediately. And so that's what we did. And so, I didn't have access to any money immediately. So all of my credit cards, we canceled them or closed them, and the only money I would have would be to ask Liz for a credit card or something like that to use. And then all of my paychecks, we actually changed the bank account. So all the money I get from work that actually goes into Liz's bank account that she only has access to. So, we felt, at least I felt comfortable enough at that point for to give up control of my money. And I know that is difficult for others, but it made a huge difference for me because the temptation, at least for me, every time I got a paycheck, like a lot of us, we just want to go gamble it. We see that money hit our bank account. I get a dopamine rush and I want to go gamble it. And so not seeing that really helped me a ton because I didn't have that temptation and I didn't have access to money. But it was certainly hard. I had to give up a lot of control and it wasn't easy to do. And by no means will I say that if anyone else wants to do it or you give access to your parents, have them look over it, or a friend, have them look over it. It's going to be easy because there are going to be times where you want to spend money on something, but you
Yeah.
can't. And the fact that you can't has been huge.
I think that's a huge one because I think men in particular, and I did exactly what Edgardo and I did exactly what you and Liz did. Like, he knows every dollar that I
Hmm.
spend. If I anytime I charge anything, even if it's a dollar, he knows about. He gets an alert about it, and that's still true. 4.5+ years later, it gives him peace of mind, and if he has peace of mind, and I'm no longer lying, I have. There's no reason why that should be a problem for me, right? But I think for men in particular, there's like this ego and so much of their self-worth tied to money and power and control. And so like this idea of I'm going to give up control to my partner is really hard for a lot of guys that are going through recovery. Like it's just another one, like, oh, I got to do this too, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's no, it's great that you can share that perspective as well. Is there like one thing, one or two things right now, as you're coming near 2 years in a few months, God willing, that you want to be working on in your recovery that like you're like, okay, things are going really well, but I still know that I want to be doing X.
Hmm. Yeah, number one is continuing to work the steps. There's really a few or a small percentage of members in the program who do work the steps all the way to completion, and really everyone that I talk to who is at a step that's ahead of mine, they just have so much peace and so much serenity in their life. And, it really is something that I do admire. And I know the more I work the steps all the way through, the better my life will become. So that's first. And then secondly is to become a sponsor. Eric, you changed my life a week in, and your guidance has been just so paramount for me. And it's been so much more than just a sponsor. When I got a sponsor, I thought it was, hey, You're going to help me get to meetings. We're going to work the steps. We're going to rip through them, and then we're going to be done, right?
Mhm.
And what it's transformed into is a lifelong friendship. And there's so many memories that we're able to share and cherish together. And we're just able to live our lives the way that they should be lived in a normal way of thinking of living, which is so cool. So those are the two areas that I want to continue to focus on in my recovery.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, your perspectives, it's like you're talking to somebody who's been in recovery for a decade because like you bring this incredible amount of wisdom and also ego deflation, which is really hard. And so you can acknowledge, hey, there's still things I still know that I need to be doing. I need to be showing up in different ways or being of service more. And I want to be a sponsor to somebody. And as we talk about all the time, all these things happen in their own time, and you're going to be an incredible sponsor when that person, and then more after that. It's only a matter of time as those things happen. So I'm really, really proud of you and all the progress that you've made. Incredibly grateful you came into the rooms, into my life, and you're gonna keep helping a lot of people. Before we wrap up, just the final question, I guess, that I always ask everyone to end things is, for that person on day one who's really struggling to find the rooms, to find recovery, to believe there's any hope, that they can't possibly imagine their life without gambling. Any words of just general wisdom, advice for those people from you?
My one piece of advice would be make it to a meeting any way you can. And then once you make it to that meeting, make it to your second meeting and any way you can. If you need to crawl there, if you need to be dragged there by somebody, do anything you can to make it to that next meeting because that's all that matters. And all that matters is you don't gamble today. And that's all that matters for you and I, Eric. And for me, it was hard to make it to that first meeting. I had to be dragged there and I showed up late. And the second meeting, I showed up late. But the people I met there and the fellowship I met there is what really changed it for me. So just make it to that first meeting, make it to that second meeting, and your higher power will look after you from there.
Awesome perspective. Any other just final wrap up words you want to leave the audience with before we close out?
There is a path forward and there's hope for everybody out there, for everyone who's struggling with this gambling addiction. There is hope. And I found that through the program and hearing other fellows in the program who had significant others and were still with them. That gave me hope and inspired me. And as deep and as dark as this disease will get, you just got to make it to a meeting and you got to work the program and you got to work page 17 in the combo book and your life will completely change and you're going to be grateful that you gambled to begin with and that led you to the program, which is the craziest thing to think about. So, yeah, Eric, thanks for having me on episode 22. Really appreciate it. It's been a blast and thank you for everything you do for our community and giving the gambler hope that they can have a better life.
Thank you, Markus. Love you, man. All right. So that is a wrap, as Markus just said, on experience number 22 in the Gambling Recovery Lounge. As always, if you have any questions or comments, I'm actually now listing my personal email in the show notes because I got a message from a audience member who was trying to email me at the Gambling Recovery Lounge email, and there's some issue going on there. So I'm now listing my personal email address, ericpaulf@sbcglobal.net, as a way to contact me directly. So that will also be in the recap of this episode. And I've updated notes on all the other prior episodes as well. So you can get in touch with me, any questions you have for me or that you have for Markus that I can relay to him, and we'll make sure that we get back to you. Love to hear from anybody who has any questions or comments about it. So with that, by the time everyone's hearing this, you're probably into January. So let's start off 2026 on a great note, and looking forward to coming back soon in the Gambling Recovery Lounge for experience number 23. Thank you again, Markus. Have a safe and healthy new year, and we'll talk to everyone again soon in the Gambling Recovery Lounge. Have a great night.